Hi, thank you for coming and taking some time to look at my video resume and portfolio of projects that I've been working on. Uh, my name's Jim.B. I'm a Pittsburgh native, computer science graduate from University of Pittsburgh. I have about 15 years of either speech recognition, machine learning, and I guess back in the day we called it big data. I started off as a software engineer, and I kind of have always been balanced in between software engineering and Devops because I have a pretty wide understanding of the full systems and the requirements and all the different levels that really come along with it, with security, with source control, deployments, the different types of deployments, whether they're going to bare metal. Nowadays, everything's containerized. Uh, you know, Docker, Kubernetes, just to name a few of the main things, distributed services, microservices, etc. So I thought it was just going to be easier to kind of do a recap of that in a video here. A lot of people want to take time to do calls with me, and it's difficult to set that up sometimes because of the breadth of knowledge and experience I have. A lot of people see maybe not enough on software or not enough on DevOps and don't realize that it's usually a lot of both. So kind of to get into it, like I said, it's been about 15 years of working in the software industry, and a lot of that was done as DevOps for mostly Broadridge Financial, other financial institutions, Bank of New York Mellon. I was a team lead for PNC on machine learning, and although I have a pretty strong background in machine learning and AI and data, one of the main things I was really doing there was the organizing the releases, the deployment, the projects, the deliverables, which can definitely be a little bit of a mess. Not a mess, but there's a lot of moving parts to this stuff nowadays, especially when you get into these big enterprises that have a lot of strict change control. So you have to be checking all these boxes technically, and there's a lot of requirements for release dates, ticketing, Scrum, and all that sort of stuff, which I really, I'd rather rely on strong engineers to know their way through a project than just blindly playing planning poker or something like that. But we do need to organize things, and I respect that greatly. Nothing is better than having a good project manager on a team helping to organize things and kind of be the front man for interfacing with the group. That said, I'd like to just kind of, I'm not a recording streamer here, so bear with me a little bit on this. I figured I'd kind of get in a little bit of my current project. I kind of took a year or so off from the industry because, well, first of all, people always ask me what I did or how I could do that. I've always been a pretty successful investor and trader working in these financial industries, and I really don't want to get too much into it, but financially I'm sound in that regard. And that's really all I want to say on that. Bottom line is that I'm a software guy. I want to get into this again. I really love the industry. As you can see here, just on my own, I've kind of made a ludicrously large amount of products and things that really were just for my own experimentation, and I'd like to walk people through them. A lot of it started as my own HomeLab, my own test bed, and I'm going to kind of touch on that, but I also wanted to demonstrate that these absolutely can be played into the modern enterprise tools, using Kubernetes, Helm charts, Docker, Jenkins pipelines, Git source control, secrets management, security scanning, LLM firewalls, etc. I mean, it's basically anything that needs to be done can be done here. So walking through this a little bit, let me see if I can kind of zoom in to the current lab. I thought it was easier to break my experiments up into kind of two different things. The actual software side, which some of these experiments are even 4 years old, and they were running in Git on my local rig. And because of that, maybe they were a little more, we'll say, like the manual transmission of software, because they were my experiments. So most of the software is now I grabbed this domain, Naturally Artificial of Pennsylvania, and then we got Smithfield Street Reports. Most of this stuff is done pretty much by the book, but I'm, really trying to kind of get more stuff done than and demonstrate my tool set and my knowledge than spend a whole week trying to polish up one thing like you would in a real enterprise environment. Generally you wouldn't have. I mean, this is beyond full stack what I'm doing here. I'm doing the bare metal, the networking, the source control, the project management, just everything. It goes far beyond just trying to do the end-to-end application development. Anyhow, so that said, some things are, and it's also an experiment, some of these, so they're done in different ways. Instead of having a uniform consistency for everything, I like to do other popular mainstream methodologies, but they might not all be the same. I will say pretty much everything's containerized at this point, other than maybe some databases and things like that that are just kind of core essential to the operation here. But that said, these are hosted publicly on on an internet provider. I have another domain that I use for emails for me, kind of like treating this like it's a real enterprise and a real organization. And there is actually some business interaction with some local people and some friends that I use on this. But my main goal with this is to demonstrate the stack that I have essentially. But that said, the main provider, I have a couple CNAME entries in there where when you go to these URLs, when you go into subdomains and things beyond that, they get forwarded differently. This is where you have basically I've set up these websites just kind of for fun. This is my jimbanant.com. I've always had this, and right now you don't see the video up here, but I plan on putting the video here that I'm making right now. This is just kind of like the landing page. A lot of this is kind of fluff, but it definitely is getting across my way of thinking. Like, none of this is, this is me, what you're looking at here. This is how I think that most things should be driven. Maybe not at like when you're working at a big bank, you're basically working with what the auditor tells you to do, what the laws tell you to do. But when you're doing more like scrappy products, your startup, you're kind of allowed to be changing things, and that's what sets people apart in this modern era. But basically, some of these experiments have been going for years for me, but I kind of formalized it recently to put this all together. This was generally meant to be more of the software platform, the applications, and I do have a few other things that I plan on adding to it, but I kind of hit the pause button on a lot of this development because I wanted to get a little bit more into the platform side. It's hard for me to demonstrate all these tools because I've just worked at so many companies where you're either siloed into one thing or another. So, you come out, basically I did a bunch of machine learning in more like old school data science platforms at PNC. I was using internal cloud deployments at BNY, but not really a lot of software development. It was huge on Jenkins and databases when I was working for Broadridge Financial, and etc. So that's kind of the point of this all. But that said, this is more for getting into the software, and this is actually the point of entry into the stack to have secured public access to it, which I say public, I kind of have a lot of that shut off from new users and whatnot, just because I'm not looking to have a bunch of random people on the internet hitting this. And then that said, Smithfield Street Reports is kind of more like the platform side. This is meant to be my actual cloud setup, and even though I do have this running on actual metal behind me, a K3 cluster that's deployed on a couple different metal nodes, the idea is that this could spread out more as needed. And even if I don't really, I don't want to be a CEO of Microsoft or something, I really just like to have these pretty high-level intense tools available for me for whatever whims and development I want to use. And it also comes in extremely handy for working at an enterprise where you might not have the access at the enterprise to be able to do an experiment. And especially if you hit a problem or something that you're having, you might not have visibility outside of your silo into another silo. So to be able to, maybe you're having cockroach DB issues running in a container somewhere and you don't know why you're getting some weird error, you can simulate that at home in this lab. And that's historically what I used to always do. I mean, these were more traditional things back in the day of like Bitbucket, Confluence, Jira integration, that sort of stuff. But to be able to just spin stuff up on your own and reproduce issues that you're having at work, it can save you a week's worth of time to sit down for an hour or two and deploy some things that might not have the strictest security, but you're not worried about that. You're trying to simulate the problem. That said, these are really just the domains. You can log in at this point. Once you hit this is actually running on my cluster here, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that as we go. That said, a picture says 1,000 words. So what do we got here? So now these will forward most of the traffic to Cloudflare. So now I'm using Cloudflare tunnels, using Zero Trust to forward a lot of subdomains to these different products as we go here. I like that. I like having them on subdomains through Cloudflare because I can just turn them off and on easy. I can add new things if I want. It definitely gives me a huge security layer. Just that network security is kind of a fundamental thing for pretty much every real application. From there, we're getting tunneled into my primary box here. So this is a Linux machine. It's pretty high powered. It has a decent GPU in it. It has some pretty good RAM. Its specs are pretty top tier from the last generation. That's usually how I roll on things. But this is running Minikube here, and this is actually my experiment testbed. This box is set up so it can be turned off and on again without having to recreate this stuff. Basically, you hit the power button, and this stuff should all be running. And we'll get a little bit more onto it from here. But this is really where my stuff lives, and I started formalizing it a little bit more just so I could kind of show people it. I've always had my own Git hosted. I used to have, I still have a GitHub account, but I really just don't see the value with it other than to showing people my code, and most companies wouldn't show their code off, and I don't know why most people would want to. I do like open source development, but there's really no projects out there that really get me all worked up to work on them. Not that won't change in the future or something. But that said, so this is the main physical machine here. I have my Git. I have a wiki, which is kind of like a Confluence running. I have Sarah AI, which is really like my own LLM that I can talk to, and she can speak back to me. I've had her set up kind of like my corporate strategist, almost like a manager for myself was her original vision. It was probably 3-4 years ago now. She was running out of LM Studio, running an Llama model or a Bloke model, and then just it was a lot of context overloading or context window programming for her. I'd update the context window with history to kind of give her like a RAG feel, but it wasn't like an official RAG at the time. Hashbreaker, I'm always playing around with a lot of mathematics and things like that. And crypto, I think it's just fun. It's interesting. I'll stay up until 2 in the morning messing with this stuff sometimes to disadvantage of my next day. And then this is just kind of a little experiment I have. It's really something to keep my plants outside from getting infested with bugs or whatnot. It runs on one of those little, I'm starting to lose myself here. It runs basically on any kind of a simple computer on chip type of a thing. I'm using a 32, like a Wi-Fi 32 chip. Just drawing a blank on that right now. But basically you get these inputs, and I'm going to go a little bit more into the software side of it as we go here. And I'm also trying to show you what would probably take 5 hours to do an in-depth drill down on in the quickest video I can. And I totally invite people to jump around the video. I'm going to try to break it up so that they can go to the parts that are more interesting to them. If you're more interested in me as a platform engineer, you can ignore all this stuff. If you're more interested in me as, some kind of a, crypto thing, you can focus a little bit more on the crypto part. If it's more about image detection, LLM training, I actually don't have the LLM training up here right now. Basically, the barefoot model was trained on different data sets, and that's really the main. It's kind of hard to find good data sets for what I'm doing on that, so it's a work in progress. And like I said, some of this has been put on pause because I wanted to just kind of organize this all, because like I said, I get so many people wanting to set up calls and people asking me about certain things, and like I said, a lot of people look at my resume, they see all the software and they don't think I know any platform, or they see a lot of platform and they don't know or they don't think I know software, etc. I think I don't know anything about anything, but usually I'm the guy that figures it out first, if not, at least not last. Kind of joking there. We'll see if I cut that out. Anyhow, so on this machine here, Streamlit is running as kind of like a bare metal process, which is really along with the SQL database, and that's really just the point of entry for this. I wanted to keep it kind of simple. There's automatic Jenkins deployments that, there's a Jenkins deployment for any source code changes, and Streamlit Live loads its changes the way it's set up, and by default it does that. There is an email service for setting up new users, so you'll get an authentication email that you have to respond to. That's basically my easy switch for preventing new users from signing on when I have that. I just keep that service down. There's a MySQL database, because I'm really just using this for pretty lightweight, just user roles, user authentication. Whenever you log in, you do get a JWT token. Java JWT token made, so you can then use that to access these other containers in here. And so that's it. I actually should have Cloudflare running on here too. But yeah, that's obvious. That's running on this machine, and that's really the main tunnel is coming out of this box, because like I said, this is my actual lab that I want to keep running no matter what. Like, even after I'm done with all these experiments, this will still be solid and usable. So Jenkins is a big core to this all, running with Git. Most of the jobs either automatically deploy via Jenkins, through Git hooks, or at least have some kind of a pipeline set up that makes them easy to use. Some of these jobs use pipelines. Some of these jobs use just regular bash scripting and things like that, or a variation of them. Maybe some Jenkins plugins. I'm trying to think what uses a plugin. I mean, definitely for like security, token injection, things like that. So yeah, we have the Streamlit, and I'm going to go a little bit into my Git stuff. I'm reluctant to show too much about the code and everything. I mean, I'm going to show some code, but I don't want somebody to look at this and see some kind of vulnerability and drill into my box. Not that I really think that that's out there. It's been pretty locked down, but yeah, that right there will probably get people challenge accepted, right? Terraform's running on here as a service that gets deployed out, and I'll get to that in a second here. But basically, my personal things that I use all the time, I have Git-T running. So, basically have my Git-T running locally here. You can see, and I actually migrated from just regular Git I had on here in the middle of winter because I just wanted to be able to show people this a little bit more. Like I said, all the questions kept coming up, and as I thought I was answering more questions, people had just more questions and wanted to see more, and that's really why it's led to this basically ludicrous video here. So yeah, so we have Git-T. It actually is hosted at, oh wait, not that. That's a different version of Jim there. So I do have this exposed here for my own use, and that's really because I develop on the box I'm recording on here a lot. This is my main machine that I work at. So back to this. We have the wiki, which really I just have so I can keep track of things. Obviously this thing is, the whole platform here has gotten pretty ludicrously big. Sarah AI, which, as I said before, I used to have an LM Studio version of her running, and I still do have it on this machine. It's a little bit less powerful, but I kind of wrapped it up and made it more publicly facing, just because I wanted to have something that other people could see and touch, or I could open up that wasn't running on my machine, and it's a little bit more formal, and I'm less, what would the word be? I can do more experiments with it without affecting my own, what do we got? Is it gonna work? Yeah, so if I hit this button right now, it's gonna grab my microphone. It'll probably mess up my video, but essentially you can talk to her. She will record the, she'll take your voice. The UI that we were just looking at, we'll pipe it into a web service here. How do I get over on this? The web UI you just saw will take your voice, put it through the main web service here. It runs it through a local LLM model, or a speech model that decodes it. We run it through a quick firewall here to make sure you didn't ask for anything inappropriate. Either you ask her to violate the security of the machine or other things like that, even though she's running in an insulated fashion in a different user in a different container. This whole thing is. So even if you got access to any of this stuff, you wouldn't be able to blow up the whole machine necessarily. But this is basically just some level of checking. Then it comes in here. It actually is hooked up to be a real RAG, so it does have retrieval augmented generation, and you could put in here business-related files. That's one of the things that originally it was meant to do. So you could basically use this as a business tool. If you were a doctor's office, if you were sales firm, your files can be put in here, and that is actually wired up straight through the Streamlit platform here. So it is kind of central to this, so they share some of these, through the data notebook here, you can upload different things into different files here. And likewise, on my machine, I just kind of add these things. So, I mean, this interface helps you get to a couple different things, and there's still some work being done here. Like I said, it's an experiment platform, and likewise, different users would have different roles. So if I could easily set this up so that whatever the business need is, it would go to, you wouldn't see some of this stuff if you were just doing data uploads, or if you were only going to be doing more mathematical stuff. I see everything here, obviously. But basically, you turn the speech into text, test it for any kind of security violation or just, policy enforcement, making sure you're not saying anything naughty. It goes into the LLM. LLM has a history of itself. Some of her, I don't have it running now, but some of her outputs would be then run to another service, and it would be summarized and then put back into its RAG history, and that was kind of user specific. So you could talk to her for days, and she'd remember like the main topics that you talked about. She might not have an absolute word-for-word recollection of it, but if you talked about cars, she'd know you talked about cars, etc. Topics like that. The LLM then does its thinking, and then takes that text, sends it out to an external service I use. I used to generate it myself, but I really like some of these other providers, and it's like $5 for me to get something I like, so I just use that. It saves me a lot of time and effort. I could run it internally, but it's not like I don't have enough going on here. That said, you get that audio back, and as the audio streams back, it actually chunks it up and starts to, or actually as it's outputting the audio, it chunks it up so that you get back a smaller sample. So instead of, if it was going to have a long response, she starts to respond to you more snappy. So there is a lot of optimization to make this pretty quick. Even if you asked, like, read me a dictionary back from A to Z, should start talking to you before that was done. And I think that generation itself would maybe take some time, and there's other enhancements that could be done there. But I did want to say it's kind of optimized to be a little snappy with the algorithms there. And then from that, it sends it back to you, and you hear it through your speakers. So essentially, you can talk back and forth with her. Doing it through the web's a little bit more tedious because of security. Basically, your browser's always fighting the mic and the speakers and whatnot. But in some of the other variants I have, she's very, very natural speaking. Pretty impressive. I mean, it's one of those things, I've talked to her so much before that I'm like, I got to stop this. It's getting weird. But not a bad product there. Hashbreaker, really, it's just a one of the things I always liked was I've always appreciated cybersecurity and the complexity of prime numbers and how we use it for for pretty much all of our security nowadays. But I also like a lot of geometric heuristics and things like that. Geometric algebra heuristics are for like really reducing your search space for these large primes. And then likewise, I kind of play around with different algorithms for this, where I think one of the core elements to this, and I'm trying not to give it away. I especially don't want to cause some kind of a major issue with this, because it does work. It's pretty cool, actually. But basically, one of the ways I can say it is, let's say you have two primes, like 7 and 5. You know that one of the if your final prime is going to be 35 there, you know that 100 isn't going to be a factor of it, or other large primes up around that level. So you can really reduce the space there. And then these get stored on disk in a tree, so they can be searched pretty fast and easy. And there's a couple test cases that definitely works for it. Definitely not something I'm giving away. And it does work. It runs in the browser if other people use it through the web. On my main machine here, it runs through the graphics card. Barefoot Nature Focus. This is my, like I said, it was just kind of to just spin me up on these more modern tools, because I really didn't have a lot of access to them at my last position, even though they were always around me. And people have asked me about this kind of stuff, like speech or image processing, and Kafka, and CockroachDB is in here too, because it's a temporary thing that's used. It's not on the chart though. So basically, you can send any sort of an image to this, and it's specifically designed for natural things like bugs and other pests and things that would be in your garden is basically the theme. You can take a picture of something, send it in here. There's an image producer service that will then take it, do a quick validation on it, queue it into Kafka as a producer. There's the consumer that will then read from Kafka's queue, and so it might grab different versions, or I forget how I have it now, if it's polling or if it's getting a signal. But you can kind of do either. I think I've done both. That's why I'm trying to remember which one it's on right now. Then it's coming out of here, going to the image classification service, which is a model that I have trained a little bit, but training, that's kind of the next step I'm on. Is I did training on it, and it was a pain in the butt, and I didn't want to spend my whole life trying to train it. And it's mostly because it's not so much because I don't know how to train the model, it's because I don't have good data sets to train it on. And the more I try to find good data sets, the more I feel like the internet was trolling me. So anyhow, you get the image classification back of what it is. So if it's, let's say you have aphids in your garden, it's going to detect it, and then it gives you that log back. And you could, I don't have it set up now, but if you got a certain alert, or you could set alerts for certain criteria. So that's more on the software side there. Some of these are, in different states. These are actually what I like to play with, just on my own at the moment. I'm running a CRM for my buddy right now. Kind of it was a test tool for him. So that said, that's a little bit more on like the software side, my LLM experience and data analysis. I've worked on a lot of different models though, in different like data science topics like sentiment, clustering, decision trees and stuff like that. More kind of straightforward data science tools, just general reports, big reports that take a long time to make, so you have to do them right. But that's more getting into SQL engineering. So, moving more towards the platform side here, we have Terraform running on here. We have an AWS CLI. Basically this cluster behind me here, which is pretty much e-waste grade machines, north, east, and south are the 3 nodes that I have running there. I have a couple other machines that I might add to the cluster for more high horsepower things, but the reality is that this box here, Skyhacker box, this is the high powered one. So all my real LLM things, all the real stuff runs on this. This down here is more for experimentation. So we're running a K3 cluster that runs across all these. North is the control plane, east and south are workers. South is the better of the two, to be honest. East is like a freaking Casio watch on your wrist as far as compute power goes. Everything out here is deployed with Helm charts. Pretty much everything follows an app of apps pattern. There's a Jenkins job that does an initial deployment of Argo CD out here, or that sets up Argo CD, and then there's a Jenkins job that does the Argo CD app of apps deployment, and then from there, basically Argo CD's running itself. On here, there's really, I don't really need this, so it's kind of just me running things for fun. I used to have Grafana running on here. I have it shut down because I really just didn't want it taking up valuable CPU and memory for me. But down here we have Grafana running. I have mini IO buckets running. Obviously Argo CDs on it. And then I have local stack running, which is probably the cooler of them, of all these things. That's basically an AWS clone. So this is running similar to an AWS stack on it right now, and then I deploy different things to it, buckets and whatnot, with Terraform. I have a Terraform pipeline, and I have a Terraform script that just touches it, does some stuff, basically just to prove that it's possible. I'm working on it now, but the time, I got a lot more ambition than I have time. I'd like to like I said, I was going to add another box over there. It's probably going to be something running like just a kind cluster on it. That's going to be probably a staging and a prod one. That's then going to use Cargo to promote these different Argo CD deployments to staging, and then I'll probably have some kind of maybe a ticketing system that needs to be approved, or some other kind of release management that goes to a prod version of these, just to kind of show the proper promotion. So that all said, that's the general idea of what's happening here. This cluster, because it's not planned on being here forever, I was thinking of setting up a different Cloudflare tunnel to it, mostly based on the Smithfield Street reports, because that's the idea, is that it's kind of like showcasing the hardware. But for now, it just has some port forwarding that brings it back to this box, which is running the main Cloudflare tunnel, which then exposes everything back to the internet. So here's the hash breaker tool. It does a couple, some fun things. You get the vllm spiral. I've always liked that. I mean, this is a freaking 80-year-old, I guess no, it's really more like a 60-year-old algorithm for finding prime numbers geometrically. Here you can kind of see the interface. You can look for a specific, you can try to break a specific web address. You can also load in a stream of them, or a bunch of them. And in general, what I do most of the time is I just have this thing running, and it's just filling up a big old disk with rainbow entries of possible pre-computed private keys, and then you can search based on that. So you get the addresses, the public-private keys from it, and the hashes, which are the addresses. Was there anything else I wanted to show you on there? So you can see Grafana's running out here. Nice, we're in. I was hoping it'd remember me. You can see what we have running on this box here. And this is really kind of the proof that this is actually running here right now on that box behind me. You can see it's been up. I mean, I don't really, like I said, other than having deployments on it and it being e-waste grade, there's not too much happening on it, so it stays running for sure. What do we have for showing what's running on it? What do we have in the overview? No data. Trying to see the containers here. It's a lot of stuff to remember and do. Just kind of, like I said, just live on this. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a streamer. You got Argo CD running here. You can see that. I definitely use Grafana, but usually I'm going straight towards container stuff, trying to figure out what's happening in a container usually. So, and this could be set up a little bit more. It's a, yeah, here we go. That, this is what I've, hindsight's 20/20. So you can see monitoring. That's the Grafana deployment that's running, mini IO, local stack, the actual cubes. Argo CD, and that's all that's running on it now. There's definitely been more things running. I mean, like I said, I don't have a lot of stuff that I don't need this for anything in particular other than demonstrating that I can manage things on it at a release level. This is the barefoot test or pest detection. Like I said, you have the ingest, the processor, different files, the way it's set up. Each of these is their own little Docker running, even though they're running in a, these aren't set up with Helm, they're running with Docker Compose because they're meant to run on a single node, more for my own utilization. You can see all these different primary projects, the websites and things, Hashbreaker, the reports, that's Sarah, and this is the actual Argo CD deployment, app of app style. You can see what we have running in here. Local stack is definitely even a little bit more. It was a little bit more of a complex deployment, so implemented some overlays and stuff like that for it. Using configure. What else do we got here? This was actually to help get Grafana visible across the network, basically for surviving a restart, so I don't have to do port forwarding for it, like I said. But most of these things are on the cluster, just come back port forwarded to the main tunnel. I don't want to misspeak too much about this stuff because it is a lot to kind of present, and I've gone through this now several times with other people, and they're usually drilling down on certain aspects or another. So I'm trying to just do a more general one here. What do we got here? Yeah, I mean, I think the infrastructure is really one of the more neat things. Here's a pipeline, just showing some of the things they're using pipelines. I said that I'm doing a Terraform deploy of 2 local stack, and then I also have just a script version of it where we're just kind of where is that? It's just this demo script. That's just basically a actual script that's running here. And like I said, some of this stuff is more perfect than others. The idea was not so much to make everything an absolute, complete, perfect thing. It was more to demonstrate the breadth of knowledge and experience. If somebody has particular questions or serious inquiries, I'm happy to kind of demonstrate a little bit more, or even if you want something in particular, I can just implement it and show you it in a portfolio to kind of prove it. Yeah, and like I said, Sarah's one of my, we'll say, the flagship here. A little bit more, it's a little bit more of a sophisticated deployment and architecture, even though I don't really like the web-based version of it, but I can't show people, nobody's going to download my software and install it on their machine, so the web one is the best way to show that. What do we have for Hashbreaker? Again, it's a little bit more on the sophisticated side. It's a more recent project. I definitely use AI tools to help generate some of the stuff and do a lot of the heavy lifting. I also, I've never seen an AI tool just give me a 100% result of what I want, at least exactly what I want. Some things are close enough that I'm like, that's fine. It was very nice to help lay out some of this stuff, but it absolutely does not, ironically, does not work on a lot of like the deep mathematical things, and I think that's because it's trained on the internet, and there's not a lot of people on the internet talking about this sort of stuff. Is there another good one? I mean, I think that's pretty much it. If whoever hung in there this long, or maybe you just jumped to the end to see what we have here. And like I said, I don't want to get too much into this all because it's somewhat of a security concern. I mean, I'm hiding behind Cloudflare, but other people might see libraries or different versions of tools that I'm importing or using and leverage it against me. So there's a little bit of security by obscurity that I definitely want to ride on. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And hopefully I put this video up on my site here, and I hope it answers a lot of the people's questions that you have about about reaching out to me. So thank you very much for your time. Take care.